In this video, I will show you quickly how you can make a gauge chart, and this is really fascinating. So let's go back here, and I'm going to go, this is the Chart.JS official documentation, and well, I use this a lot and I love to explore this. And if you're not up to date, recently they launched the 2.7.3 version, which is nice. Some new fancy updates in there. Alright, however, what we're going to focus on is just only on our comparison table here. And I was looking at this and I'm copying this as well. I want to put it in on my wonderful site here. However, when I was reading this, the built-in chart types, you can see here, these are all the built-in chart types. And I saw this, the gauge, and it says it's not built in. And I understand what they mean. Just imagine like that. It's not built in that you have like a chart called gauge, but a gauge chart. So if you might wonder, what is a gauge chart? A gauge chart is like a speedometer or it's more like a dashboard indicating how successful, how fast, or whatever you are doing something, or just measure something basically, like a speedometer. And it says that it's not built in, but in reality it is, just with some minor tweaks. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So if you scroll down here, and we had it as well, and I thought, well, if we're having this comparison chart, why not say, hey, wait a minute, of course we can. How can we do this, you might wonder? Well, if you click on this, you will see exactly how, and it's really fascinating. It is more simpler than you can imagine. Alright, this is not mine thing, so I'm just copy someone's CodePen here. I saw it here, but alright. So this is the gauge chart right now. You can see here, and if you look at it, this looks extremely much like a pie or donut chart, or more specifically a donut chart. And if we see here, well, we see here all of this, we can ignore all of those. Let's open up our JS version. And in the JS here, you will see some piece of code that says, wow, this is exactly a donut chart. So the person here is very creative. They use the donut chart, but instead of drawing the full donut, it only draws the half. And you might say, how can you do this? Well, this is really fun, and there's so many tricks with Chart.js. So let's scroll down here, and probably you can find it also in our nice documentation, but it's not really clear because the explanation, well, it just lacks some explanation, of course, but let's look at it. So we go here, we go to the donut chart, and we need only two things here. So if you scroll down here to the bottom somewhere, we have all these options. And if you check my course out, I go deep in this and I even discuss this as well, but it's just fun to see this. So here we have something that's really nice, and that's what we call the, the circumference. Yes. Sweeps to allow arcs to cover. So you might say, okay, what does this mean? This is fancy words, but you might say, what does it mean? Well, basically it indicates the circle of the donut or the arc. So what they call this is an arc, basically. This small piece here, these two pieces are arcs. So one arc, two arcs, and basically should be all around. Well, that's the normal. Yes. However, if you go back here, let's look for that and let's explore that. You'll see that it is not. So I'm just scrolling up and down, but let's go down here. So I'm on the top, and let's go down so you can follow along. You can see here circumference. This is fascinating because the circumference is by default 2 times math.pi. And remember, if you understand math, pi is the formula for a circle. So it says here times 2. So right now, if you really read this carefully, the circumference is only multiplied by 1, meaning you only have half. So if it's times 2, it should be 2 times that all. So let's try that. Alright, so I did this, and then I'm waiting. Alright, there we are. You can see immediately it starts to load. Wonderful. So this is really a fascinating way, because now you can start to play around with it, and it's just all in here. So you might say, okay, what happened if you do 3? Well, let's try. There you are. So you can see here it starts to go, and of course it messes up because we are like double all over the place. But this is basically where it starts. So what will happen if you just remove this again? Then we have again our original starting point. And now you will say, well, okay, this is fine. What about the rotation? What is the rotation? So the rotation here is this starting angle to draw arcs from, meaning the starting point where you draw the arcs. So right now, this is the rotation is here, and if we you can see the rotation by default is math.pi in this gauge chart. So I want to say gauge, but it's not gauge, it's gauge chart. You can see the rotation by the standard rotation in Chart.JS is minus 0.5. So let's try that as well. If it's minus 0.5, it shouldn't start here, but it should start probably here on the top, like a normal pi, well, like a normal chart. So let's do this, and it's a minus 0.5. All right, so let's click and click, and there you are. You can see now we're moving it up and down, and this is really fancy. So if you do 1, well, 1 is already thing. So if you do 1.5, you're probably moving it to the other side or down. So it's exactly the same. So if you do 0.5, we already did. So this is 0.5. All right, you can see here now it starts to move around. So I'm getting slightly confused. It was minus 0.5, and if it's 0.5, it moves to the other way. But if you do 1, it means that it will start at the very left of this, like what we did here, or you just remove this because by default this formula equals 1. Here you are. So this is really fancy, and maybe you say, well, this is not so special, but it's just fun to understand that you can work a lot with Chart.JS without doing so much more. If you want to know more about this, check out my course on Udemy, where I go deep in every chart of Chart.JS, and that's really fun, and we start to connect with the database and learn a lot more to become more better with Chart.JS, because once you know how to use Chart.JS, you can do all kinds of things. You're like the magician in data, and I love that. If you love that, you understand what I'm talking about.